Why does the world still compare Poland to Russia, as if they belong to the same story? Two countries in the same region, both shaped by war, empire, and history. But here's the problem. That comparison isn't just inaccurate, it completely misses what makes Poland Poland. And right now, in a time when Eastern Europe is under global attention again, misunderstanding this difference isn't harmless. It shapes how people see identity, culture, and even geopolitics. So this video breaks it down clearly. Not just why Poland and Russia are different, but why putting them in the same category is one of the biggest misconceptions about Europe today. And by the end, one thing becomes obvious. These two countries didn't just take different paths. They were built on completely different foundations. At first glance, the comparison almost seems logical. Geography? Close enough. History? Both experienced empires, invasions, and war. Language? Slavic roots. So people assume they must be similar. But that assumption is exactly where things go wrong. Because similarity on the surface doesn't mean similarity in identity. Think about it like this. Sharing a language family is like sharing distant ancestry. It doesn't mean the same worldview, the same values, or the same national character. And here's where the real difference begins. Poland's identity was shaped by resistance. Russia's identity was shaped by control. That single contrast explains more than most history books ever will. Poland's history is defined by something unusual, long periods of not existing. For 123 years, Poland was erased from the map entirely, partitioned between powerful neighbors. No state, no independence. But something fascinating happened during that time. Polish identity didn't disappear. It survived through culture, language, religion, and community. Not through power, but through persistence. Now compare that to Russia. Russia didn't disappear. It expanded. From the Tsardom to the Russian Empire, and later the Soviet Union. The trajectory was about growth, influence, and centralized authority. So while Poland developed a mindset of holding on to identity without a state, Russia developed a mindset of projecting power through the state. That difference still echoes today, and it leads to a deeper question. What happens to a nation when its survival depends on resisting control versus enforcing it? In Poland, freedom isn't just a political concept. It's emotional, cultural, almost instinctive. Because historically, losing freedom meant losing everything. That's why movements like Solidarity weren't just political protests. They were expression of something deeply rooted in society. People weren't just fighting a system. They were defending identity itself. Now contrast that with Russia's historical structure. Strong centralized authority has been a constant theme, from czars to modern leadership. Stability often came from control, not from grassroots resistance. And this creates a fundamental difference in how people relate to power. In Poland, authority is often questioned. In Russia, authority has traditionally been expected. Of course, reality is more complex, but the contrast is undeniable. And it affects everything from politics to daily mindset. At this point, it's worth asking, why do so many people still group these two countries together? Is it geography, media narratives, or just lack of deeper understanding? Drop a comment with what seems most common. It says a lot about how Europe is perceived globally. Now let's talk culture, because this is where the misunderstanding gets even stronger. Yes, both countries have rich traditions. Yes, both value history. Yes, both have strong national pride. But the expression of that pride is very different. In Poland, culture often reflects resilience. Music, literature, and traditions frequently carry themes of survival, identity, and resistance. Even everyday traditions, holidays, family gatherings are deeply tied to preserving what has been historically threatened. In Russia, cultural identity has often been tied to scale and influence. Grand narratives, large historical arcs, a sense of being part of something vast and powerful. Neither is better or worse. But they are fundamentally different, and confusing them erases what makes each one unique. Another major dividing line: religion. Poland is overwhelmingly shaped by Catholicism, and this isn't just about belief, it's about identity. Religion played a crucial role in maintaining Polish culture during periods of occupation. Churches weren't just places of worship, they were centers of national continuity. Now compare that to Russia. Historically Orthodox, yes, but with a different relationship between church and state. Religion often aligned more closely with authority structures, rather than acting as a counterbalance. So again, the pattern repeats. In Poland, identity often resists control. In Russia, identity often integrates with it. And over generations, that creates completely different societal instincts. Here's where things become especially important today. When people outside the region compare Poland to Russia, it's not just inaccurate, it can be harmful, because it ignores Poland's alignment with Western institutions, values, and political systems. Poland is part of NATO, part of the European Union, deeply integrated into Western economic and security structures. Russia, on the other hand, positions itself as a separate power center. So grouping them together isn't just a historical mistake, it's a modern one. And in today's geopolitical climate, that misunderstanding has real consequences. It affects how countries are perceived, how policies are discussed, even how cultures are respected. Let's bring this down to a more human level. Imagine two individuals shaped by these different historical experiences. One grows up in a culture where identity survived despite losing the state. The other grows up in a culture where the state has always been central to identity. How do they view authority, risk, freedom? These aren't abstract differences. They influence how people approach business, politics, education, even everyday decisions. And that's why saying they're similar doesn't just oversimplify things. It misses the point entirely. This isn't just about correcting a misconception. It's about understanding Europe more accurately at a time when global attention is focused on the region. When headlines mention Eastern Europe, nuance often disappears. But nuance is exactly what matters, because without it, countries lose their individuality in the global narrative. And Poland's story, shaped by resilience, resistance, and cultural preservation, deserves to be understood on its own terms, not as a comparison. So the next time someone says Poland and Russia are basically the same, that's the moment to pause. Because behind that assumption is a misunderstanding of history, identity, and everything that makes nations unique. If this perspective added something new or challenged what's usually heard, consider leaving a like. It helps more people see a more accurate picture. And if deeper insights like this are worth exploring further, subscribing is the easiest way to stay connected. There's always more beneath the surface, especially when it comes to understanding places that are too often simplified. And the next topic might challenge another assumption just as big.